Remember this little gem from the vice presidential debate where J.D. Vance had to basically correct the young lady from ABC who was just backwards? Here we go.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be.
Absolutely. That was the clip that is kind of pushed all of this in this direction of, you know what? If Tren de Aragua has taken over 3 apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, what are they doing where there are, large numbers of Venezuelan in actual sanctuary cities? Denver's a sanctuary city, and Aurora basically got the overflow from Denver because housing is short and folks got to go where they can afford. Aurora, Colorado. So you had 3 big apartment complexes basically get taken over, and mainstream media is trying to cover that and say, oh yeah, there's no issues here. It's not a big deal. I mean, it was very confined. No, it's not. Evil super gang seizes 4 apartment complexes in major Texas city in new terrifying show of strength. That major Texas city is San Antonio, Texas. So, got Aurora, you got San Antonio, you got Houston. Yesterday, I talked about middle schoolers being recruited by Tren de Aragua in Houston to become part of a big shoplifting unit of Tren de Aragua. That's in Houston, Texas. You've got arrests in Utah. You've got arrests in Denver. You've got arrests in New York. New York is just loaded because you got a big Venezuelan population and New York gives out all the benefits. They give out all the bennies. Housing, $10,000 debit card, you can do whatever you want because it's a sanctuary city. And especially if you're a kid in New York City, if you are an illegal immigrant living in the shelter system, the world is your oyster as far as this type of crime goes, because even if they do pop you, nobody's going to hold you accountable for anything because that's what sanctuary cities are doing. So dangerous Venezuelan gang is taken over, dubbed the epitome of evil. Tren de Aragua, known to run drug smuggling, child prostitution, and human trafficking rings in South America, and coming to a city near you. They're all over North America, guaranteed. Anywhere you've got a big Venezuelan population, you have got Tren de Aragua. You've got some affiliate. You've got some, something along those lines. They're in the United States. And it's because we've allowed them to. We allowed them to come over the southern border and just enter our country. And very little vetting, little to no vetting. One of the big things that people always say is we need to deport these people. Okay, you got to remember, Venezuela doesn't have any diplomatic relationships with the United States. We're not really deporting anybody anywhere. So where are you going to send them? Mexico? Yeah. I don't know. The problem is you've already created the problem. All these folks are here. Trump's talking about deporting them if he gets in office. The logistics of that would just be horrific. How are you going to actually do that? So we are stuck with this issue, and we're stuck with Tren de Aragua, and we're seeing more and more news stories pop up. So tattooed mobsters have been unleashed, a wave of crime across the country from Miami and Texas to Denver and New York. Denver being a huge sanctuary city. New York, probably the biggest. Chicago, right in there. Miami, of course. Why wouldn't you? And now we're talking Texas. We're talking El Paso, Texas. We've got the one hotel where La Barbie is operating her 5 children as drug mules while simultaneously running prostitution ring out of a hotel. And folks are like, but it's only one hotel. The odds of it happening in just one hotel, if it exists, it exists, right? It's way more than that. Gangs activities in the American cities are back in the spotlight after ABC News' Martha Raddatz claimed the instances of gang members' presence in apartments was limited to a handful of complexes in Aurora, Colorado. And what will happen with that news story is that there will be arrest after arrest after arrest of members of Tren de Aragua, and those stories will pop up, and mainstream media will do the very best they can to suppress them, because it's a horrible look for an administration that is literally trying to win another election and has this issue keep repeatedly popping up. What about those arrests that are going on there? What about San Antonio now? We had Aurora. Another podcast I'm going to do today is the management company of the 3 apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, basically making some statements to social media. That stuff is interesting. They're basically saying those projects were absolutely 100% taken over. And because of the violence that, their property managers were threatened with, they basically backed off. And Tren de Aragua said, hey, we'll co-manage these complexes with you, but we're going to take half. We're going to take half the income. So, with that going on, the owners, property management company, the lender, they all basically just went tilt. Don't really know what to do here. Meanwhile, Aurora, Colorado is trying to minimize the impact of how this makes their city look. Oh, it's just 1, if not 2, maybe 3 buildings in our fine town. Well, if it's in 3, it's in a bunch more. And if it's there, it's in other communities, and hence this podcast. Law enforcement sources confirmed Tren de Aragua had been operating in the Palacia apartments for 5 to 6 months, squatting in empty units that they either rented out to other migrants, used as a base to deal cocaine, or most horrifically, as prostitution dens to pimp out women and children. Now, why are we always pimping out the women and children? Because it's easy to do. And you've got a whole bunch of illegals that have come into this country and they've created these debts for themselves that need to be paid off somehow. And unfortunately for the young ladies, it's on their back. And the children, how many of these kids come into the United States unaccompanied? Thousands. Imagine coming into the United States, you're an 11-year-old girl. Yeah, that's gnarly, right? Tren de Aragua gets a hold of you. Hey, we can help you pay off that debt. Now, you're going to have to do some things that are a little bit unsavory and a little bit ahead of your time, but you'll get used to it. It'll be fine. And then we'll let you go. We'll just let you, be free. Doesn't happen that way, does it? That is naive at best. But when you're 11, 12, and you're looking around going, I don't know what to do. My parents aren't here. My family's not here. You got to make decisions. But now Daily Mail can reveal that this apartment invasion is just the tip of the iceberg in the major southern Texas city, with at least 3 other rental properties also occupied by the criminal organization. The news stories that are going to come out, this is no-brainer stuff, making these predictions. You're going to have one after another, and you're going to be like, there's a big Venezuelan population in that town, in that city. Interesting. Yeah, they popped another group of Tren de Aragua. Weird how that happens, right? We know better. And J.D. Vance knew better. And we knew when we were watching J.D. Vance that he knew, that she knew, that he knew better. Because this is not brain surgery. This is not rocket science. This is criminal elements taking over and doing what they do, which is exploiting the young, the weak, the women, whomever they can exploit. That's what they do. And if you're coming from Venezuela, hey, you've got an opportunity coming into the United States. Do what you got to do. Get that foothold. Doesn't matter how you do it. You just get it and you keep it. Daily Mail is not naming the other 3 apartment complexes because they don't want to bust the police investigation. In a pre-dawn operation, hundreds of law enforcement officers closed in on the sprawling Palacia apartments in the early hours of October 5th after spending weeks investigating reports that Tren de Aragua had control of the area. Neighbors recounted how they awoke to the sound of helicopters, drones, and doors being kicked in at around 5 a.m. Do it at 5, do it at 6, do it sometime where everybody's sleeping, right? Wake people up, their cell phones aren't charged up yet, they can't quite make the calls, whatever. Just they're in their underwear. They're literally every department was here. They're wearing helmets and body armor, said one female resident who asked to remain anonymous. This is good. My husband came outside in his boxers, as you do when you're like, oh, good Lord, who are all these people? And had a rifle held to him. They said, who are you? He said, I live here. They said, where are you from? He said, Pennsylvania. And that was the end of that. All right. We got white boy here in his boxers talking to us in English, no accent. Gonna go with he is probably not part of Tren de Aragua. After searching over 300 units, cops arrested 19 individuals, 4 of which have been confirmed as gang members. One Tren de Aragua member is confirmed enforcer for that gang, and 15 were in the country illegally. Mobsters who brazenly showed off gang tattoos or wore red clothing were squatting in empty units where they sold drugs or humans, he added. Selling of people. That is what Tren de Aragua specializes in. They specialize in human trafficking and sex trafficking because it's a built-in commodity within the folks that they deal with, which are other Venezuelans. So it's pretty easy to take advantage of somebody who's already just barely hanging on. They booked it out of Venezuela. They accrued a whole bunch of debt getting here. And then all of a sudden you tell them, hey, you do some sex acts. We can whittle that down pretty quickly. And then it just doesn't work out like that, right? Doesn't happen because the Tren de Aragua, the gangs have zero reason to let these folks go. Because who are these folks going to go to? You're already working with the American government trying to get their visa, get their whatever, get their citizenship. But that's going to take a long time. Meantime, you got bills to pay. And so many of these cities have said, hey, come our direction. And then all of a sudden, like Chicago and Denver, oh yeah, no. Boy, we realized how much resources we're spending on all you illegals. And so we gotta cut the tie on that because man, we can't afford this. Chicago, especially $1 billion deficit is what they're looking at. Yeah, they need to cut ties hard. And that's what they're doing. So all of these folks that have come into the United States and been told, hey, come here and you get all the freebies, and then those freebies disappear and they don't have a work visa or they're not making enough money to cover their bill. They got to do something and they don't have a great skill set or they're young. What are you going to do? You're going to do what somebody offers, even if it's horrific. Yeah, so here's a graphic of what we're kind of looking at. Castle Hills, it's with the other 3 that are unnamed. You got Palatial Apartments, San Antonio International Airport. Man, this is right by the airport. Then you got a migrant center right here. Makes absolute sense. Why would it be located anywhere else? It wouldn't. It's just you go where the action is, right? You go where the action is. Bunch of, now here's our famous video, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, but I mean, was that real? I don't know. You tell me. These guys look pretty real to me, right? It's Tren de Aragua, but mainstream media doesn't want to admit that that's happening because then you got to admit that Tren de Aragua is literally running around willy-nilly in apartment complexes in the United States. And that is the crux of what is literally going on. And that is what, mainstream media is. Don't talk about that. It's limited. It's a limited problem. Here's another thing the article hits on. Prostitution is a big moneymaker. And the thing with prostitution is that it brings guys in that they can sell dope to. Drugs, girls. What more do you need to say? What more do you need to say? These guys come in, they meet these Johns, and they shake them down, see if they want to buy drugs. They started with moving these girls through, and if you go in these apartments, you'll see these young girls. It's bad. And those are the girls I'm talking about, young Venezuelans. Horrific, terrible, super young. But you know what? It's becoming accepted in our culture that this is just how it's going to go because we allowed 10 million people. I think the official count is 7-point-something million people into the country. And just based on sheer numbers, a certain percentage of those are going to be super young. They're going to be females. They're going to be women coming unattended or just folks without a ton of money who are going to have to make some hardcore decisions. And this is where they end up. And because they have a built-in marketplace of dudes who want to do some drugs, who want to do some whatever, sex acts of whatever sort. And this is not brain surgery to, figure out here's how this story goes. What is entertaining is to watch mainstream media's just absolute bending over backwards to smooth this over. Oh yeah, don't talk about that. Oof, yeah, no. Oof, yeah. How's the weather out there, John? Phil, I heard that you had a garbage collector strike going on today. Oh yes, we did, John. Know what I mean? Just absolutely wild. Meanwhile, there are outlets that are covering these stories. And that's where we sit. That's what we're doing here at News for Reasonable People. So love to have you subscribe, do all that good stuff, because we're covering this and we're just going to keep on going. It's what we're doing. This is what's happening. This is reasonable to report on reality. Thanks again for being here. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.